Hey everyone, welcome to our first webinar in Climate and Faithful Climate, Stories of Service, Spirituality, and Climate Change. This series is a new series by Texas Interfaith Power and Light and the 787 Collective that's organized by Becca Edwards and myself, Madison Turner. With this series, we'll be focusing on how different missions, ministries, and spaces of service around the world are being impacted by the climate crisis and how different leaders and communities are now responding. So to those of you who are with us live and to those of you who will be watching this recording and listening, we're so happy to have you all with us today. We're going to be starting by learning about our speaker, Josiah, and his work with Global Ministries. And then after that, Josiah is going to give us a presentation on the work that he's doing right now related to climate justice. After his presentation, we'll have time for questions, and where those of you who are with us live can message in the chat and ask Josiah questions about his work. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to show a video about Global Ministries, one of the organizations that Josiah is working with, that tells us a little bit about what Global Ministries does.
Need for mission. In such a time as this, with natural and human-made disasters, a pandemic, loneliness, sadness, strife, and uncertainty, people need to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. God is calling us, every one of us, to mission. Mission is at the heart of the United Methodist Church. Everything we say, everything we do, and everything we believe. The General Board of Global Ministries, which includes the United Methodist Committee on Relief, UMCOR, is the mission and humanitarian relief agency of the United Methodist Church. Global Ministries connects the church in mission through programs in 4 priority areas: missionary service, evangelism and church revitalization, humanitarian relief and recovery, and global health. In each of these areas, people are responding to God's call to mission.
Hello, my name is Roland Fernandez and I serve as General Secretary of Global Ministries in UMCOR. I'd like to share with you a few reflections on how the United Methodist Connection is advancing God's mission. Hearing about the faithful work of United Methodists all over the world, I hope that, as the author of Hebrews writes, we are encouraged to love one another and to help one another to do good deeds. More than 200 dedicated missionaries and an additional 200 nationals on mission share the love of God as expressed in the life and ministry of Jesus Christ. All over the world, they bring health services to communities, aid those affected by disaster, plant churches, and serve in countless other roles. Global Ministries' evangelism and church revitalization efforts include support for multi-ethnic ministries in the United States and mission initiatives in Asia, Africa, and Central America. These efforts seek to improve livelihoods, establish peace and justice, provide access to education, and develop strong and resilient churches and communities. Humanitarian relief and recovery efforts are more crucial than ever in a world of devastating natural disasters, the increasing damaging effects of climate change, and armed conflicts that displace thousands of people, fueling the global refugee crisis. UMCOR works diligently in the United States and all around the world to provide hope and healing to people suffering from both man-made and natural disasters. We help rebuild communities struck by tornadoes, earthquakes, and storms. In the United States, working through annual conferences, and internationally, working through the United Methodist Church and other ecumenical partners. We also have a long history of ministry and advocacy for refugees and displaced populations. We continue this important ministry today, working with those uprooted by war and civil conflicts, such as the war in Ukraine, and those at the US border, supporting their resettlement. Global Health Ministries helps develop health infrastructures to enable vulnerable communities to overcome preventable diseases, malnutrition, and lack of access to medical services. We also seek to address maternal and newborn health concerns and improve clean water and sanitation. And as natural disasters from climate change and environmental degradation become more severe and more frequent, Global Ministries strives to address challenges facing God's creation, promoting environmental sustainability to projects that stress renewable energy sources. In Africa, the Yambuso Agriculture Initiative has continued to expand, using local land resources and training farmers on best practices with the goal of establishing income streams that support both local communities and the church. As we look to the future, peace and justice work will continue to grow as a focus for us as we confront violence, discrimination, and inequities in our global community. The church must be a voice for those whose voices cannot be heard. Hebrews tells us to hold fast to the hope we confess without wavering, rooted in the promises of our faithful God. In such a time as this, when so much seems uncertain, we rely on the grace of God and the power of the United Methodist Connection to make an impact for the mission of the church. Together, we are strong, and our work is reaching more people in more places than ever before. Thank you for supporting our work with prayer, volunteer work, and financial support. Together, we join hands and hearts to respond to God's call to mission as we spur each other on towards love and good deeds.
That's the Global Ministries video. And today we're sitting down and talking with Josiah. Josiah is from Freetown, Sierra Leone, and is currently what is called a Global Missions Fellow with this Global Ministries organization, which is connected to the United Methodist Church. Global Ministries Fellows are young adults who commit 2 years of their lives to go out into the world and serve in social justice ministries. And Josiah's ministry is with the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance in Kenya, working to combat climate injustices through supporting grassroots movements and communities that are seeing the frontline effects of climate change. And so, without further ado, Josiah, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Madison. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And I hope we'll have a wonderful conversation as I get to share about my work and how, through the grace of God, we are making impact and also touching life from my own side. Thank you so much for having me, and welcome everyone on board.
Beautiful. So I can't tell if the go ahead and please share a presentation. We'd love to see it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madison. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Just as I have been introduced, I am Momodu Syl Josiah, a young adult missionary since August 2020, and I'm serving in Kenya, Nairobi, and I'm from Sierra Leone, West Africa. My place of assignment is the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, and I'm there as a Global Mission Fellow, and Global Mission Fellows are young adults between the age of 20 to 30 who are committed to social justice ministries for 2 years. And just as Madison rightfully introduced, we enter into new communities to address challenges and also build relationship with these communities to address long-term systemic oppression. Briefly, as I dive into my presentation, let me take you to my place of assignment, which is the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, PACJA for short. It's a continental coalition of 1,000 plus civil society organizations from diverse backgrounds, and they have a presence in 51 African countries. The headquarters is in Nairobi, where I work, and it brings together faith-based organization, community-based organization, non-governmental trust, foundations, farmers and pastoralist group, amongst other sectors. And we work with government to drive Africa agenda at international level, and we also have strong partnership with partners from the North and the Global South. At the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, basically, our work has to do with working with farmers to promote smart agricultural practices. We also advocate for green and renewable energy. We work on capacity building programs, and we do lots of advocacy for climate justice. As I continue my presentation, as a Global Mission Fellow and as a young adult missionary serving in Kenya, I view climate change from my own lens, and permit me to kindly share with you how I view climate change from my own lens. Firstly, I view climate change issues as an issue of poverty, because we know that climate change exacerbates poverty in the world, especially on this global south. And also I view climate change as an equality issue, as it disproportionately affects those poorer countries and vulnerable sectors of the society. I also view climate change as a justice issue, as the problem was caused by richer countries and richer people, and the poor are the most affected. I also view climate change as a humanitarian issue, as many catastrophes and disasters are caused by climate change. Climate change is also viewed, from my own point, as an economic issue. And as it has stunted growth of many economies, while big economies fear cutting emission will affect them. And most importantly, above all, I view climate change as a stewardship issue, a stewardship from God, because I believe the earth is a sacred gift that has been given to all humans, and we must protect and care for it. That is my climate change lens. That is the lens that I view climate change from. Firstly, as a poverty issue, as an equity issue, as a justice issue, as a humanitarian issue, as an economic issue, and lastly, but most importantly, as a stewardship issue. Climate injustice. The injustices of climate change in Africa. First, I want to state that for Africa, it contributes less than 4% of the human-induced greenhouse gas emission that is responsible for global warming. Secondly, even though Africa contributes less than 4% of human-induced global greenhouse gas emission, unprecedented rains, extended periods of drought, strong storms, and other extreme weather events are wiping out crops, drying up water resources, and driving disease outbreak. As I proceed with my presentation, I also want us to note that in all this, 33 out of the 54 African countries are classified as least development countries. But out of these least development countries, we only contribute 4% of human-induced greenhouse gas emission that is responsible for global warming. So the issue of injustice or justice could be clearly seen from this point of view. But as I proceed, sometime by the ending of last year, I had to participate in the collection of grassroots stories that will be evidence-based, grassroots stories from communities that are really affected by climate change. Because one thing that I know for sure, we talk about climate change, we talk about creation care, we talk about climate justice, but all the talk, all the ideas that we float most times ends in the boardroom or in the meeting room. But those that are in the front line of climate change, that are really feeling the brunt of the climate change, get to actually feel or get their voices out there. So as an organization, together with me and other colleagues, we embark on going out and gathering grassroots stories. And permit me to kindly share one of those grassroots stories. The link is in the presentation that will be shared. You can take your time and go and read some of these stories that gives you like a first-hand experience, a first-hand picture of exactly what's happening on this side when it comes to climate change. How are people affected? What have they lost as a result of climate change? And I would like to share an experience of a man called Gatia. That's not his real name. He's 78 years old, from a marginalized and indigenous community in Kenya. He has lived his entire life there. When he was young, his area was a serene place with plenty of pasture for his livestock. They had a lot of grazing land, and their lives were full, enjoyable, and with plenty to eat. Lake Baringo and the rivers were clean and provided clean water for drinking, fishing, and swimming. Livestock used to drink water from them without limitation. By the time he got married, he had grown his animal to 3,000 sheep, 200 cows, and 500 goats, and he could sustain his family adequately. He paid dowry for his 7 wives at once. There was peace, plenty, and wonderful moment. But over time, things changed. The land have shrunk, the rain have become scarce, and the temperature has risen. As a result, they no longer have sustained livelihood on their lands. They have seen livestock die, schools close, and people displaced. They have also seen outbreak of diseases and early teenage pregnancy. As chair of the Ilhamus Council of Elders, he had seen firsthand the impact of climate change on his community. And he said, and I quote, "We are calling for help to address climate crisis and its impact on our community. We need help to find new ways to sustain our livelihood, to build more resilient infrastructure, and to protect our health. Climate change is a global problem, and it will require a global solution. We need everyone to come up together and take action to address climate change. We need to invest in renewable energy, reduce our reliance on fossil fuel, and protect our forest. Climate change is a threat to our ways of life and the future of our planet. We need to act now." And when I was putting together the presentation, I also thought about how can we actually take action. And I believe we can take action, even though there is this climate crisis. It's affecting people from all over the world. And what could we really do? And I think we can take action as individuals, and I think we can take action as a joint group or joint actions. Individual actions basically has to do with we adopting a sustainable practice. It could be the use of public transport. It could be supporting renewable energy. It could be planting trees. It could be advocating and educating others. It could be recycling as much as possible. Those are all individual actions that we can support. Those are things that we can push. And I think we can also become part of a joint action, which basically tells us about we becoming part of a bigger solution by acting in our communities, in our churches, in our circular groups, and calling for government and corporate action. And recently, I have been involved in some activities, and on the top left, you can see the CCDA, which is a Climate Change and Development in Africa conference, which was the 11th conference held in 2023, just in September past. And I was part of the few young people that were there representing and pushing the interests of young people from Africa and also young people from Kenya. And I was also representing not just PACJA, but also the United Methodist Church in that meeting. And I was opportune to meet lots of young people where we had to discuss and talk about climate change, what could be done. We networked and actually pushed to take action. And I was also opportune to be part of the International Youth Day, which was also in September, October. And we had exhibition, I Could Be Seen in the Black. And I also had to meet with other young people where we discussed issues of climate change. How can we actually address it as young people? Because in all this, Africa, 70% of the population of Africa is young people. And the burden of climate change lies on our hands. lies on our head and we need to take action. So I have been involved in these two meetings, the Climate Change and Development in Africa conference, and also I was opportune to be part of, together with some other young people, as we met, we discussed and charted the way forward in addressing climate change. And also, this is me in the field on the bottom left. We have a project called the Africa Energy Transition, and I had to go into the field to supervise the construction of a solar panel that we are putting on. And one of the remote, very remote communities we can think of in Kenya, it's a Maasai community, it's an indigenous community, and we had to power them with electricity. And that's me on the left. There are lots of photos that I would have loved to share, but basically my work has been three things. One, I do a lot of advocacy, and I do capacity building of communities, and I also work with communities in addressing climate change through the locally led climate action. Locally led climate action simply means, like, as a community, we are faced with climate change. What can we do locally without external support? What could be done to address our climate change? What can we do as a community? What can we do as a people? So I've been working with communities in addressing that. And one of the projects is the Africa Energy Transition Project, which basically deals with locally led action. As communities, what can they do? What do they want? And how can we address some of the climate crisis that we are facing? So you can join me or you can follow me on social media to get to see the work that I'm doing, and through the grace of God, representing the United Methodist Church and also the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. This is my Facebook, Twitter, and down below is my email. And to support my work, if you feel like you want to support my work, you want to help make change, you want to help touch lives on the other side, this is my advance number. I want to say thank you, Asante Sana. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Josiah. It's such a wonderful presentation. You did a really good job on it. So, now we have some questions for you. So, doing this advocacy work, what kind of work do you find yourself doing day to day? You're talking about a lot of, like, helping out with grassroots movements and talking with communities, but what does that look like on the day to day?
Okay, on a day to day, I work as a programs officer, and we're implementing three projects in my department. And first, I do a lot of advocacy, and as part of my advocacy is speaking and influencing and also messaging. That's one. And also, I also do a lot of capacity building training with communities that are on the front line of climate change. And capacity building in the sense, you are faced with drought, what could be done? How can you actually be able to still be in your drought situation even when it's not too extreme? How can you be able to plan something? What can we support with? So I work with communities to actually build their capacity. And also I work with other communities when it comes to locally led climate action, which is the way to go. If there is a community that used to have a river here, and now the river is getting dried, as a result of that, they cannot get fish. So as an organization, what can we support with? We can say, okay, since you had a river and you are solely dependent on fishing to get your livelihood, but if you cannot get your fish anymore, we might want to support you with a fish pond where you can still be getting your fish. So those are like the locally led climate action that we do and that I support.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're really listening to the communities that you're working with and seeing the needs of where they are at that moment.
Yeah. where they are, what they need, and how can they also be ready and willing to take action.
Mm-hmm. So how did you decide to focus on climate change and climate justice specifically for your ministry?
Okay. In ministry, like we don't get to decide what you want to do when you're applying for a Global Mission Fellow program. Even though my area of study is related to environment and so, but I get to be posted at the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. And I must say, it was not as if I had planned this, but you go with an open mind, and then you engage, you try to connect, and then you make sure you grow within the process. And I was posted by the United Methodist Church. It's the work of God. You don't have a choice to decide. You leave your home, you leave your comfort, you leave your family, and then you just go. And so far, I've enjoyed my service with the United Methodist Church, and I've really grown on the process also. And I think I'm a convert for climate change and climate justice, even at the end of my service, because I've learned so much, especially when it comes to dealing with communities. And I'm here in Kenya serving, and I'm thinking like, oh, back home, now we are addressing things here. How about we do this back home? This is not being done back home. So with all that, I think it has been a blessing, and I thank God for the opportunity to serve with these communities. And it can be really touching, and I've enjoyed my service with them, and I feel inspired to take more action.
Mm-hmm. What do you feel like that you've learned in this process, of especially coming to climate justice so fresh and new?
One thing that I've learned is that firstly, when it comes to climate action, we all talk about climate action, we all talk about climate change, we all talk about climate injustices, but are they really being addressed at the frontline level? Are indigenous communities really benefiting from all the talk that we do? That is something that I've learned that is not happening, and we need to do more. And I've also learned that communities have things to offer. If you're going with a brilliant initiative to them, they are always ready to give something back. Like if we want to install a solar panel for their community so that they can get access to energy, they'll tell you, okay, we don't have much, but we can offer you this piece of land that you can do. We can offer to fence the place where the solar is. You find out that communities are also ready to take action. All they need is the little support. And I also have learned that the climate change narrative should be taken off the tables, off the boardrooms, off the meeting rooms, and then we should focus more on the front line.
So you said before, you mentioned that you don't get to choose where you go, like God is the one who calls you to where you need to go. And so I was wondering, has there been specific moments in your work where you've really seen the work of God?
Yes, for me, those moments, I call them sacred moments. And I just call them sacred moments because these are inspiring moments for me. And these are moments that actually keep me going. And I've had many. For every time I am opportunity to go to the front line where there are droughts, or maybe famine, or maybe one or two natural disasters have happened, and you live there always inspired. You live there always thinking that, okay, these people are still comfortable living here. They don't want to move out. If only they could get everything that they want, they will not actually want to move out. But those moments actually gives you an opportunity to actually reflect as to how good God has been to you. And also you live there thinking that what could be done, especially seeing that these communities that are faced with some of these natural disasters, especially droughts, which is one of the things we are facing in East Africa, especially Kenya. You see communities and you see people trying to rebuild their lives. You see them being resilient. You see them being strong. You see them being not saying no, not giving up. I think that's something that actually touches you whenever you see these people with all their conditions, with all the challenges they are faced with, but they are still pushing, they're still going, and they are so resilient and hardworking and determined to keep going, to keep pushing. Those are moments that actually leaves you thinking, leaves you reflecting, and makes you appreciate the goodness of God more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sounds like you've had a lot of moments like that, those sacred moments. Um, and you also said that you found a lot of inspiration with the people that you work with. Can you tell us about a person who specifically has really inspired you in this work?
Yeah. Um, for me, it's a female environmentalist. She's passed on now, but she's a Kenyan, and I got to read about her, and I got to see some of the things she was doing. She's named Wangari Maathai, and she's the first African woman to win a Nobel Prize. And she was an environmentalist, and she was doing a lot. And since she passed on, much has not been done in continuation of what she was been doing. And I think that inspires me a lot to see what are some of the initiatives that she had and how can we drive some of these initiatives together with other young people, especially when the burden of the climate change is so much on us, and we just have to find ways in addressing this. We need to talk, we need to build our own capacity and also take action regardless of how small it is. But she is an inspiration to me, especially having gotten to read about her, see some of the things she was doing and what could be done and what's there to be done. I think that keeps me going.
Mhm. Yeah, I think especially in this kind of work, I think there's a lot of loss, and especially, whether it's the loss of the people who inspired you to do this, like how you were talking about, or even just, all the loss that you see of people's livelihoods and their lives because of, all these droughts and climate change. And I'm curious, how have you um, found a way to cope with the grief that you see and experience through this climate justice work?
Okay, that can be tough. That can be tough. But what keeps me going is the encouragement and the belief that God has been good. And I
Mhm.
most times try to look at their situation from my own point of view. I ask myself, what if I was in their own situation? And that gives me solace. That gives me like, okay, God has been good to me. I look at it from that point of view. That okay, I can grieve for this. Sometimes it can be tough. You get some engagement with people. Maybe you get to give them your number. Be calling you, hey, we want this, we want this. This is what's happening, and so. And it can be tough, especially when you have seen their situation and you've been with them on the front line. But these people are always cheerful. That's the surprising thing. You go there, if they have their food they want to share with you. You go there, they want to talk to you, they want to ask you questions, they want to interact with you. And that gives you comfort when you sit back and say, I thank God. And you use that as a reason to be more grateful to God and to be more thankful to God that first you are not faced with those challenges, and that secondly you are assisting to address some of these challenges that they are faced with. So that gives you courage, it gives you solace and closure. Yeah.
Mhm. So to me, that sounds like a spiritual experience that you're talking about, finding gratitude and hope with the people that you work with. And I'm really curious, how has your spiritual journey been impacted by your climate work?
My spiritual journey has been impacted by my climate work, and I feel more and more and more spiritual, and it also gives me more time to reflect on the goodness of God, basically, if I may say. And also that experience that I'm getting from my personal engagement with them has also helped me to grow and also connect the church also in mission, because wherever I go, people know that, okay, this guy's from this denomination and he's working with this organization and this is what they are doing for us. So for me, it's more about connecting the church in mission and also growing personally and spiritually in holiness, and also in addressing some of the challenges that they are faced with. So basically, I have grown spiritually and personally, and also I've been able to connect the church and mission, which gives me lots of fulfillment.
Mhm. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I think part of me is, after talking about, where you've seen God and, the important work that you've done on the front lines, I'm curious, what do you feel like is the one thing that you really want our audience to come away with today?
Okay, and for me, it's about we taking action, and
Mhm.
there's no action too small. There's no action too little, and whatever action we take, whether small or big, from whatever part of the world, might have an impact on another side of the world. And for me, climate change, it's a justice issue, and it could be linked with colonialism, and colonialism could be linked with access to oil and raw materials and resources. And these raw materials and resources fuel the industrial revolution, which eventually led to global warming and pollution of greenhouse gas emission. So basically, when you connect those linkages, you find out that climate change should be looked at as a justice issue. And there is no action too small to take. And whatever action or inaction that you take might have a consequence on someone else in another part of the world. Someone else that is totally unconnected, that is just there living their life. And most of them are uneducated, most of them are poor, most of them don't even know what this whole idea of climate change is. You ask them what's climate change, they will tell you, we don't even know. And then you go down to their level. Okay, how often does it rain? They will tell you, 10 years back, it used to rain like 2 times or 3 times in a year. But now it takes us 2 or 3 years, we don't see rain.
Mhm.
That's the kind of idea, that's the kind of messaging that we actually, when we're engaging with them. But basically, I think the audience need to take action, and no action is little, whether it's personal, whether it's you being part of a larger organization that wants to take action. Every little things count, and it can help a lot.
Do you think um action is where we find hope in like our future?
Come again?
Do you think this action that you're talking about is where we find hope for the future?
Yes, it could be where we find hope for the future. It could be about we also actually preparing the future for our for generations to come. It could be about we doing the little things, we actually deciding that we want to save the planet. And it's also about having the sense of responsibility and knowing fully that, okay, if I do this, there is an action on the side. If I don't do this, there is an action also, or an inaction that will happen on the side. So basically, for me, it's more about having a sense of responsibility, and we knowing that whatever we do, we have a negative impact on someone else. To me, action is about the little things that we do. It's about we being aware, and it's about we being sensitive to the plight of people that are going through climate change and the climate crisis, and we actually finding solutions. And for me, the other thing that I also enjoy is actually engaging with communities to find solutions, locally led climate action solutions. It helps a lot, and I think we can all find solutions in our own settings that we find ourselves. Look at what can be done, what's not been done, and how we can fix things.
Mhm. Josiah, thank you so much for coming here and speaking with us today and speaking so eloquently on how we today can help our neighbors across the world and have hope. And thank you for telling us also about your spiritual journey in this and how helping people has impacted you so much. I think if there's any other questions,
I could ask a question.
yeah, go for it.
Sure. Thank you so much for your presentation, Josiah. I learned so much, and it's really, really valuable to hear from somebody that's working so closely in this area in a part of the country that I don't know that much about yet. So I learned a ton, and I'm really grateful for your presentation. And one of the things I really appreciated is the way in that case study that you talked about at the beginning about the farmer is just how many areas of his life were affected by climate change. And I think that's something that gets a little bit lost in the US. But he lost his livelihood, he lost his ability to feed his family in a very, very tangible way. And I was also inspired later by the way you said that community members are ready to take action and they just need support. And you talked about an example of providing a fish pond for a community that lost access to a river. And I think in climate policy terms, we would refer to that as adaptation. But you also talked about putting in solar panels to bring electricity to indigenous groups, which we would call mitigation. And I can see so many possibilities for integrating some really deep needs in the area, like adaptation and mitigation and electrification and health outcomes. So can you comment more on sort of the intersection of those various goals that you hear about in areas like you've described, and the way the global community can support the work that is going on related to both climate and development and adaptation?
Okay. Well, when it comes to adaptation and mitigation, like they go together. And we do lots of adaptation programs, and we also do some mitigation programs. But for us, basically, it's about building resilience and making communities to cope with climate change. And that aside, we also deal with farmers. And there are some parts in Kenya where there are a lot of droughts. So we find seed for them, seedlings that are drought resistant and that can have also a quick turnaround time, like sorghum, sunflower, and beekeeping also, just so that we restore some of their livelihood. We've been doing that, but I think there is a potential and there is a need to actually build on some of the adaptation mechanisms that we have so far. It's not enough. Is there a way for partnership or to address some of these issues? Yes. And also the mitigation aspect when it comes to actually preventing the climate change adverse effects from actually making you to lose your lives or your way of life, which is often affected by climate change. I think there is a potential there. There is something that could be done, and it takes our collective effort. It takes our collective actions to actually get this done. But for me, I focus more on we, whether it's about adaptation, whether it's about mitigation, but it has to be locally led. It has to be at the front line, because we most times talk adaptation, mitigation, and what we want to do, but people are not feeling it on the front line. People are not feeling it. 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 People are not fe those that are really affected, indigenous communities, women groups, they are not really feeling all the adaptation, mitigation, loss and damage. We talk about all these, and when it comes to actions, we don't see much being done. So for me, I prefer we put the adaptation, the mitigation, the loss and damage, and every other thing together in the form of the locally led climate action at the front line of where exactly. It could not be in Kenya, it could not be in East Africa that has drought, but it could be in the small island nation that has been wiped away as a result of rising sea level. What can we do? What action can we take? How about we go there and meet these communities and tell them, okay, we can assist you with this. What can you bring? What's there to offer? What resources do you have that we can actually tap on to address some of these challenges? So I think that's the way to go. But for partnership, we can partner with various organizations, we can partner with community groups, but it should be at the frontline level. It should be about we taking actions from where the climate change is happening, those that are affected with the climate change crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Josiah. Thank you so much for coming on with us today. Anybody else, any other questions? All right, well, I think that's about it. Thank you guys all so much for coming and listening and watching today. And in the coming months, there will be another webinar coming up. So be aware of that. And then there should be some blogs coming out soon this month. So thank you all. Have a good day.